Hey y'all, this is your girl Bre'Anna, and this is the Divine Intervention Podcast. I want to thank everybody that hopped on today and who's joining me. And the title for today's episode is Grounded in You. I decided to create this space because I wanted the Divine Intervention Podcast to be a space where I try my best to learn how to make space for myself and then also try my best to just learn how to take up that space. I'm here after recording a bunch of episodes, a bunch where I was completely overthinking, completely in my head, and operating in a capacity that completely went against why I wanted to create this podcast to begin with. And so I wanted to share that to not only be transparent, but to also be honest with myself. I wanted to name this first episode Grounded in You because I've always felt like it's important that in everything that you do, you always have something that keeps you rooted in yourself, something that never allows you to really forget who you are. And so I'm here today as Bre'Anna Coleman, a young woman from the Mississippi Delta who has been on a path for a long time of not only mental health, but learning myself and figuring out my identity. And also a layer of being transparent. It took a good minute for me to realize that my best approach to this podcast is probably no camera just because it removes that added layer. And it was honestly adding a layer of stress that was completely unnecessary. And I wanted to create this space to, if I'm being honest, I'm the type of person that I am a complete overthinker and I spend a decent portion of my time in my head, and I really wanted to give myself a space where I could allow my mind to wander instead of trying to find ways to take me out of my head. I was recently sharing with someone that for a large portion of the first half of my life, I feel like I was trying to figure out how to navigate other people. And I feel like now I'm in a state of just trying to figure out how to navigate myself. And I think that that really has allowed me to be more real and raw with myself about how I feel about things and why. And that's also a really big reason why the Divine Intervention podcast got started. I also titled this episode Rooted in Myself because if I'm being honest, I started my mental health journey pretty early. I started it in about seventh or eighth grade. And it was mainly because I noticed that I was putting a lot of my self-worth in my academic abilities and how I could produce for other people. And so for that last year of junior high or middle school, I told myself that I would just try my best and that as long as I did that, that was really all I could ask of myself. And for me, that was the beginning of, I guess, me trying to figure out who I am outside of one of the primary things that people noticed about me. And that journey traveled with me into college, where freshman year I was able to get into counseling and talk to someone and really get a better idea of myself and who I am. I would say one of the things I was most grateful for college is that those 4 years really gave me the opportunity to get to know myself. oftentimes I thought of it as like being in a relationship with myself and really just learning me. What do I like and don't like? What are my best ways of communicating? And I found that there are a lot of labels and titles that I placed on myself. I think that for a long time, I kind of operated with therapy through the lens of other people's expectations of me. But I think recently, I've really been narrowing in on my expectations on myself. And how does that impact my relationship with myself or my ability to really truly see myself? Which is another reason why this podcast was born. The last 5 months of 2025 for me were very significant. They were significant because that was kind of when my thinking process changed and I shifted and I started to think in this way. But I think what really kicked that off was I was in a journalism class and I wrote a paper on the cultural restraints of self creation. And in the paper, I was mainly talking to my professor about it. And I was talking to her about how when you're someone with intersecting identities, and even having identities that may contradict themselves based off of the world's definitions of things, how that impacts you when you enter spaces. How does that impact the way that you show up? And when I wrote it, it really made me think deeply and critically about myself. I have, but not in a mean way, more so in a, it made me realize why I viewed things in a certain way. Um, and it really helped me understand myself a little bit better. And so, saying all this to say, divine intervention was birthed out of me just walking in this journey with myself and figuring out who I am. And that's a lifelong journey. So, and I'm a yapper, I can talk. So I have literally nothing but time, but I really wanted to just provide myself with a space where I could kind of free roam and allow myself to really just be, um without expectation, without being polished, without consistently asking if I make sense, but allowing myself to, for a moment, just not care if I am. And so that's kind of how this podcast came to be. At the beginning of 2025, I was also going through a thought process of just figuring out what I wanted to do career wise. I felt like I always leaned towards being a lawyer, but I think my last 2 years of college made me really look myself in the mirror and ask myself, are you following grown breeds dreams or are you listening to the little girl within you? And not saying this to say that I don't want to be a lawyer. That is an option that's still open because I think one of the biggest things that I've been constantly reminding myself of is that there's so much life to be lived. And I think that for this portion of it, I kind of want to just spend my time learning how to just be, learning how to not only grow into myself, but allow myself to be who I am and whoever that is and whatever that means. And so also during that time period where I was figuring out a job, because when you're a senior in college, you The figuring out a job part is real. Um, and I went to someone in my community, and they connected me with someone to do a radical inquiry. And for those who've never heard of a radical inquiry, it is basically an experience of looking deep within yourself and figuring out what are your non-negotiables, what keeps you grounded, and who are you. And to give an exact definition, a radical inquiry is a transformative process of deep, honest self-reflection designed to strip away illusions, challenge personal or systemic patterns, and align actions with core values. And so throughout this process, it took a lot of me really asking myself, what will it take for me to be, well, for one, real with myself and honest with myself. And I think for such a long time, the reason why I really leaned towards being a lawyer is because I was really just looking for financial stability. And I feel like when they teach you about careers, they don't teach you about how you can have that financial stability while also having a job that, if I'm going to be honest, I have learned about myself that I am actually a relatively pretty laid back person. I prefer to do things on my own time. And I really wish when they taught us about careers that they taught us about like the work lifestyle balance and what that really looks like. Because the more that I thought about it, and I know that being a lawyer can look different in different capacities. But I've always leaned towards advocacy just because I love helping people. And within the radical inquiry, it basically taught me about myself that one of my most important core values and one of the most important things that steer me is literally just being rooted in myself and feeling like in whatever I do, I'm being true to who I am. And so from that radical inquiry, I was asked for a basic statement, a statement that could kind of remind me, and I landed on rooted in myself. And so from that, I started this radical inquiry at the beginning of 2025. And this poem wasn't finished until my baby sister's birthday. Shout out to Nisha. December 31st, literally that exact day. And I felt like when I finished it, that I knew that it would be the perfect poem to end my first episode on. And so it's titled Rooted in Myself. Aiming to be as in tune with the trees, that I remain rooted in who I am, authentic as my branches extend and nourishing like fruit that sprouts from my compassion within, wishing to be nurturing as the earth. To be able to pour into those around me while their words pour back into my soul, giving me the gift of love that never grows old and shine as bright as the moon. To go through phases where I lose my glow and come back again, as you know I would, because there's no point in beauty without pain, no point in darkness without light. I hope I grow as balanced as the serpent, learning the duality in my good and evil, allowing myself to be seen in all that I am, while being as consistent as the sun. My scorching rays shine and breathe light into others as oxygen from trees gives life to me. I wish to see myself the way I view the butterflies and bees, that the stinger that was planted to protect teaches me to be a guardian over my own peace. And always remember that even when, like a butterfly, I can't see my own wings, that the beauty radiates from within, and the outer reflects the care I pour into my own lens, that I learn to exist in all phases, cocoon or fully extended wings. Because both are my story as it weaves and sings, I wish to be as supportive to myself as the grass. That I stand and offer true balance from the ideals that clash and allow even the conflict to water the soul of my being. I hope for the strength of the wind, that carries me off my feet and into the frequency where my story begins. I've stalled and waited for someone else's confirmation, but I no longer need anyone's validation. I may not know my destination, but the journey feels just as sweet. Like the pollen that floats without true guidance, but always lands exactly where it's meant to be. And like the galaxy, I continue to evolve. So even when the changes are small, they ring true to the God above. My heaven resides within. My peace starts here and will follow me because I'm not searching for peace, since my peace has always been here with me. Thank you so much for tuning into my first episode, and I'll see you in the next one.